At a dinner party in my own house, my daughter-in-law tied an old apron around me and said, "This old lady will serve us tonight." Guests laughed. My son said nothing. I smiled, poured their wine, and swallowed my pride. Weeks later, they begged me to sign over the house. Instead, I tripled their rent. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The aroma of roast chicken wrapped around me as I stepped into what had once been my kitchen. Now it belonged to Samantha, every polished surface gleaming like a showroom. My cardigan felt too thin against the chill that wasn't in the air, but in the way her eyes slid over me. The laughter from the living room rang bright and easy, Ethan's laughter among them. My son, my only child. "Mom, you made it!" Ethan's voice cut through the noise. He appeared in the doorway, grinning, the same boyish tilt to his smile that once melted every bad day. He kissed my cheek, barely brushing the skin, before drifting back to his colleagues, all sharp suits and glittering glasses of wine. I tightened my grip on the apple pie I'd baked that morning, the crust browned just right. Where should I put this? My voice felt small in that gleaming kitchen. Samantha swept in like she owned the air, her dress hugging her figure in a way that screamed effortless perfection. She took the pie without looking at me, depositing it on a side table as if it were a convenience rather than a gift. "Oh, how quaint," she murmured, lips curling in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she said it. "Actually, Margaret, you're just in time. We could really use an extra hand in the kitchen." Before I could answer, she was pulling open a drawer. The room quieted just enough for the sound of sliding wood to echo. From its depths, she drew out something faded and familiar, a floral apron, soft from years of use. My apron. From the days when this kitchen smelled of Daniel's aftershave and Sunday roasts. Samantha held it up like a prize. "Perfect for you." "I don't think—" "Oh, don't be silly." Her voice was sweet, her hands brisk as she stepped closer and slipped the apron over my head. The fabric fell against me like a shackle. "Everyone," she called brightly as she tied the strings at my back, too tight, too final. "Meet Ethan's mother. This lovely old lady will be serving us tonight." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, polite, uncomfortable. No one quite sure where to look. My cheeks burned hot enough to sear flesh, but I forced my lips into a smile. "Happy to help," I whispered, barely audible over the clinking glasses. Ethan glanced over then, his eyes sliding across the scene like water over glass. A quick nod, a distracted smile, and he turned back to his boss. My humiliation didn't even register. Or worse, he chose not to see it. For the next 2 hours, I floated through a haze of commands and condescension. "The glasses need polishing before you set them out." "You missed a spot on that plate, Margaret." Every correction delivered in a voice honeyed enough to make protest sound ungrateful. I carried trays of steak so tender it cut like butter, poured wine that cost more than my weekly groceries, collected plates heavy with scraps. My hands trembled once, just once, but I willed them steady, swallowing dignity with every murmured, "Of course," and right away. Once, a kind-eyed woman reached for a dishcloth to help me. Samantha intercepted her like a hawk. "Don't be silly, Rachel. You're our guest." "Margaret doesn't mind. That's what mothers do." Her hand landed on my shoulder, squeezing just enough to bruise. "Of course not," I said. The words tasted like ash. Later, alone in the kitchen, I scrubbed dishes while their laughter drifted in from the dining room. "She's just so traditional," Samantha said lightly, her voice carrying. "Insists on helping. You know how women of that generation are. They don't know what to do with themselves otherwise." Each word struck like a lash. I stared at the suds swirling in the sink and wondered how it had come to this. How the house Daniel and I had bled for, the home where Ethan took his first steps, had become a place where I was nothing more than help in sensible shoes. When the last guest left, Ethan brushed a kiss across my cheek. "Thanks for helping out, Mom. Samantha really appreciated it." His voice held the careless warmth of someone who believed they'd paid you a compliment. "You can leave the dishes," Samantha added with a theatrical yawn. "I'm exhausted from hosting. Just let yourself out when you're done, okay?" I nodded because words had deserted me. Outside, the night pressed cold against my face as I walked to my car. The steering wheel was icy under my fingers, though my chest burned with something raw and relentless. Tears blurred the streetlights into halos, but I drove anyway, each mile taking me farther from the house I no longer recognized, and the life I wasn't sure I belonged to. By the time I parked outside my small apartment, the tears had dried to salt on my cheeks. I sat in the dark, engine off, hands gripping the wheel as if it could anchor me. For years I had smiled through slights, swallowed hurt, bent myself into smaller and smaller shapes to fit into Ethan's world. But tonight, something inside me cracked wide open. The woman who meekly tied on that apron, I didn't know her anymore, and I didn't want to. I stared into the shadowed silence and whispered to no one, "Never again." Morning light crept through the blinds like an uninvited guest. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, a chipped mug of tea cooling between my hands, untouched. The humiliation of last night clung to me like the smell of dishwater on my skin. Every detail replayed in sharp, merciless loops. Samantha's polished smile, the tug of that apron string, Ethan's distracted nod while strangers watched me serve. I stared at the faded tablecloth, the pattern worn thin from years of use, and felt a weight settle on my chest. It wasn't just last night, it was everything. Every slight I had swallowed, every comment that left a bruise no one could see. And suddenly, memories began to march through my mind, one after another, relentless as a tide I couldn't hold back. It hadn't always been like this. When Ethan first introduced Samantha 5 years ago, she was all warmth and open arms. "I've heard so much about you," she'd said, hugging me as if we were destined to be friends. "Ethan adores his mother." Her smile had been so dazzling that for a while I believed her. After Daniel died, 7 years now, though it feels like yesterday, Ethan had been my anchor. He called every day, dropped by with groceries, sat with me through the hollow evenings when grief felt like an animal clawing at my chest. He made sure I wasn't alone during holidays. I thought nothing could shake that bond. Then Samantha came along, and things changed so slowly I almost didn't notice. The first time was so small I nearly convinced myself I imagined it. Ethan's birthday. I'd brought a family photo album, a gift filled with memories of scraped knees and first days of school, of Daniel's proud grin at every milestone. Samantha had flipped through it with a light laugh. "Oh, these old pictures," she said. "They make the house look so dated, don't they? Maybe we should keep them in storage." Storage? As if decades of love belonged in a box. Ethan said nothing, just looked uncomfortable. The next time I visited, the album was gone from the coffee table. Christmas came, and with it the tradition Ethan and I cherished, baking Daniel's secret recipe cookies together. Samantha had swept in with her effortless authority. "I've planned a different menu this year," she announced, "something more sophisticated than those simple cookies." Ethan's eyes had flickered with something, regret, guilt, but he didn't argue, and neither did I. From there, the exclusions multiplied like cracks in glass. My suggestions for the wedding? Politely ignored. Offers to help renovate their first home? Dismissed. My tastes too traditional. Invitations to Sunday dinners dwindled, phone calls sent to voicemail, excuses piling up like autumn leaves. "Mom, we're just so busy with work," Ethan would say, his voice soft, apologetic. "You understand, right?" And I did, or thought I did. I told myself young couples needed space, that this was natural, that Ethan was building his own life, and it was my job to step back. I wanted to believe that. I clung to it like a lifeline. But now, with the bitter taste of last night still on my tongue, I wondered if all of it had been orchestrated. The house had been the turning point. After Daniel died, it felt too big, too empty. When Ethan and Samantha mentioned they were looking for a place, I offered them a deal. Rent my house for a fraction of its worth. I'd move to a small apartment nearby. Keep the family home in the family. "That's so generous, Margaret," Samantha had said, her eyes glinting in a way I didn't understand then. "But let's make sure we have a formal rental agreement. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings." I'd thought it was sensible. Now I realized she was drawing a line, staking a claim. From the moment they moved in, my visits became rare. Always a reason: renovations, guests, Ethan, working from home. And when I did step through those doors, the changes were like tiny deaths. The kitchen Daniel and I had designed, ripped apart, replaced with sterile modern lines. Family photos vanished, walls hung with abstract art that meant nothing to me. The garden Daniel loved, where he taught Ethan the names of every flower, paved over for a patio. We wanted to put our own stamp on the place, Ethan said when he saw my face. Samantha has a real eye for design. And then there were the comments, so casual, so cutting. That outfit is certainly comfortable, Ned. Your generation just doesn't get modern careers. Technology moves so fast once you reach a certain age. Always with a smile that dared me to take offense, knowing it would make me look petty if I did. Each remark chipped away at something inside me, and I let it happen. I told myself I was keeping the peace, staying close to Ethan, being the easy mother-in-law. But last night, there had been nothing subtle about last night, forcing me into an apron like a servant, calling me that old lady in front of strangers while my son looked away. I pressed my palms flat against the table as if I could anchor myself. This wasn't just Samantha's doing. Ethan had stood there. He had let it happen. The thought hit like ice water. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Helen standing there, her face tight with concern. "I've been calling you all morning," she said, sweeping in like a storm. "What happened? You look awful." I tried to speak, but the words tangled with the tears I'd been holding back. When they finally broke free, they came in a flood. Helen listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from worry to anger, her jaw set like stone. When I finished, she took my hands in hers, firm and steady. "This has gone on long enough, Margaret," she said. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes blazed. "Tell me honestly, how long have you been letting them treat you like this?" Her question hung in the air like a verdict. And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. "How long have you been letting them treat you like this?" Helen's voice sliced through the air, sharp as broken glass. The question hung between us like smoke, heavy and choking, and I couldn't find an answer. My throat worked, but no sound came. Her eyes softened, but her grip on my hands tightened. "Margaret," she said, her tone low, steady, unyielding, "this is not who you are. You're stronger than this. I've known you for 30 years. You don't let people walk all over you." But I had. God help me, I had. I sagged back into the chair, staring at the worn pattern of the rug as if it held the answers I couldn't find. The truth poured out in pieces, brittle and jagged, each word tasting of shame. "It started so small," I whispered. Little things I told myself didn't matter. Then bigger things. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I was helpful, accommodating, they'd want me around. Helen's jaw tightened. "And in the process, you erased yourself." I closed my eyes, and in the dark behind my lids, I saw flashes of last night, the apron, the pitying looks, Samantha's syrupy voice dripping venom under the guise of sweetness, and Ethan standing there, doing nothing. That hurt worst of all. Helen stood abruptly and began pacing the small living room. "You gave them your home, Margaret, practically handed them the keys to your life. And what did they give you in return? Humiliation, disrespect." Each word landed like a hammer blow. She wasn't wrong. I had let this happen, step by step, cut by cut, until I was bleeding out my dignity in silence. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. My voice cracked, thin and brittle as old glass. Helen stopped, turned, and crouched in front of me so our eyes were level. "You stop letting them control the narrative. You stop bending until you break. And for God's sake, you stop thinking this is love." Her words lodged deep, and something shifted inside me. A slow burn, faint but growing, flickering to life in the hollow where fear had lived for so long. After she left, promising to call later, the walls of my apartment pressed in like a cage. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my coat and walked, needing air, space, anything to quiet the storm raging in my chest. The park was nearly empty, save for a few mothers wrangling toddlers and an elderly couple tossing crumbs to ducks. I sank onto a weathered bench, the wood cool beneath me, and stared at the pond, its surface rippling under a gray sky. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard it. The laugh. Bright, brittle, unmistakable. My stomach clenched as I turned my head. Across the street at a sidewalk cafe sat Samantha. Her hair gleamed like polished bronze, her manicure flashing as she gestured animatedly. Beside her, a sleek blonde leaned in, smiling. Their table was close enough that fragments of their conversation floated on the breeze. I should have left. God, I should have stood and walked away. But I didn't. I sat frozen, half hidden by an oak tree, my pulse hammering in my ears. You should have seen her face, Samantha said, her voice lilting with amusement. Standing there in that ridiculous apron like some kind of servant. The other woman laughed softly. Wasn't she embarrassed? Embarrassed? Mas what ass? Samantha gave a dismissive snort. She doesn't even realize how pathetic she looks. Always hovering, desperate to be included. It's actually weapon. Each word was a blade. My breath came shallow, my nails digging crescents into my palms. Does Ethan ever say anything? The friend asked. Please, Samantha scoffed. Ethan knows which side his bread is buttered on. I've made sure he sees her the way I do. An obligation, nothing more. Trust me, he barely notices anymore. The world tilted, the edges going blurry. I clung to the bench like it was the only solid thing in a spinning universe. So what's your endgame? The friend asked. Samantha's smile curved like a blade. The house, of course. It's worth a fortune now. I've been working on Ethan, convincing him it's time his mother signed it over. We'll make it sound like we're helping her. A nice retirement community an hour away. Perfect solution. A harsh laugh followed, cold enough to freeze bone. I don't remember standing. I don't remember crossing the street or the walk back to my apartment. I only remember the ringing in my ears, the pounding of my heart, the single truth blazing through the fog. They weren't just taking my kindness for granted. They were planning to take everything. By the time I sank onto my bed, my hands still trembling, the afternoon sun was slicing through the blinds in cruel stripes. I stared at the ceiling, numb and burning all at once, the echoes of their laughter still slithering in my head. They thought I'd roll over. They thought I'd sign away the last piece of my life for a scrap of attention. Not anymore. Don't go anywhere. What happens next will change everything. Night draped itself over the city like a heavy cloak, but inside my apartment, the air felt even heavier. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands clenched in my lap, Samantha's voice still echoing in my head like poison. A retirement community an hour away, signing over the house. They thought they could erase me completely, neatly, efficiently, just like they erased every trace of me from those walls. The phone shattered the silence. Its sudden ring made me flinch so hard the mattress trembled beneath me. For one suspended breath, I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Ethan. His name glowed against the dark, as familiar and foreign as a dream I no longer trusted. I almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, the way he had so many of my calls. But something made me swipe the screen, press the phone to my ear. Mom, he said, his tone so casual it scraped like sandpaper. Hey, we were wondering if you could come by this weekend. There's something important we want to talk to you about. We, always we. My stomach knotted, tight as wire. Something important, I repeated, forcing my voice to stay steady, as if I didn't already know. Yeah, he said lightly. It's about the house. Nothing bad, don't worry. We just have an idea we think would benefit everyone. The words were a blade wrapped in silk. My breath caught, but I made my voice calm. I'll be there, I said, and hung up before he could hear the storm brewing in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Shadows crept across the walls, stretching into grotesque shapes as the hours dragged. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Samantha smirk, heard her laugh as she plotted my exile over cappuccinos. Fury simmered, but fear whispered beneath it, cold and relentless. They were counting on that fear, counting on the woman who tied on an apron and smiled through humiliation. By dawn, that woman was gone. The first thing I did after the sun clawed its way over the skyline was reach for the phone again. Not to call Ethan, not to plead or explain. No, this call was to Richard Collins, the lawyer who had guided me through the darkness after Daniel's death. His secretary sounded startled to hear my voice after so many years, but she scheduled me for that afternoon. The hours crawled until I was finally sitting in Richard's office, surrounded by the smell of old leather and law books, the faint tick of a brass clock marking each second of my resolve. Margaret, Richard said warmly, his handshake firm, his eyes still sharp despite the silver now threading his hair. It's been too long. What brings you in today? I told him everything. The rental arrangement, the creeping disrespect, the suspicion that they wanted me to sign away my home. He listened without interrupting, his face a careful mask as my story spilled out like water through broken glass. When I finished, he leaned forward, his fingers steepled. First, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, let me make one thing clear. You are under no obligation to sign anything. That house is yours, free and clear. The knot in my chest loosened, just a little, but Richard wasn't done. Let's take a look at the rental agreement. I slid the folded papers from my purse, my hands trembling slightly. He scanned the document, his frown deepening with every line. This rate is far below market value, he said finally. Have you ever increased it? I shook my head. I wanted to help them. That's admirable, he said carefully, but according to this agreement, you're entitled to adjust the rent annually. You've never exercised that, correct? No. My voice was flat, the realization dawning like cold dawn on a battlefield. Margaret, he said, his tone soft but unyielding. Properties in your neighborhood are renting for at least triple what you're charging. Triple. The word landed like a hammer blow. My breath hitched. All these years, I thought I was being generous. I thought I was helping my son. Instead, I had been subsidizing a lifestyle that came with my erasure as a bonus. What would happen if I increased the rent? The question came out quieter than I intended. You'd need to give 30 days notice, Richard said, sliding the papers back toward me. Legally, you can adjust it to match market rates. Is that what you're considering? I thought of Samantha's laughter slicing through the air like a blade, of Ethan's eyes sliding away while I stood humiliated in my own kitchen, of the years I spent shrinking, twisting myself into smaller and smaller shapes just to stay close to my son. Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. That's exactly what I'm considering. Richard nodded once, approval flickering in his gaze. Then let's make sure everything is airtight. By the time I left his office, the weight I'd carried for years had shifted. Not gone, not yet, but different. Heavier in some places, lighter in others, like armor settling across my shoulders. My next stop was Paula Grant, a real estate agent recommended by a friend. She confirmed what Richard had said and more. With the upgrades they've made, Paula said, her manicured finger tapping the market analysis, you could easily triple the rent, maybe more. The irony burned like whiskey. Every choice Samantha made to erase me, the renovations, the designer finishes, only made the house more valuable in my hands. By the time I walked out into the sharp bite of evening air, my plan was clear. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation of my home, my dignity, my voice. The meeting was set for Saturday. I'd walk into that house, not as the woman who tied on an apron, but as the woman who owned every nail, every brick, every memory embedded in those walls. And for the first time in years, I almost smiled. I walked into Richard's office yesterday feeling like a victim. I walked out with a weapon. And if you're still with me, don't go anywhere because the storm that's coming will change everything. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without tears on my pillow. Not because the pain was gone, God no, but because it had hardened into something else, resolve. It sat in my chest like a living thing, steady and pulsing, whispering, you're done being small. You're done being silent. Morning light spilled across the table where Richard's papers lay in perfect order. The rental adjustment notice, the market analysis, the highlighted clauses in the agreement that Samantha had been so eager to draft. Her own obsession with control would become her undoing. By noon, I was in Paula Grant's sleek office, a space that smelled faintly of lemon polish and ambition. Paula slid a folder toward me, her manicured nails tapping against the cover. This, she said, is the current market rate for homes like yours. With those renovations, new countertops, modern fixtures, that patio, they have boosted the property's value significantly. You could easily triple what you have been charging and still be competitive. Triple. The word had lost its sting and now tasted like power. I let my fingers glide over the glossy printouts, columns of numbers, photographs of houses gleaming under perfect skies. This wasn't about greed. It wasn't even about money. It was about reclaiming what I had given away, piece by piece, until there was almost nothing left. "Prepare the paperwork," I said, my voice calm, steady. For the first time in years, I sounded like someone I recognized. When I left Paula's office, the winter air cut sharp against my skin, but I didn't shiver. I felt awake, alive. People hurried past with coffee cups and shopping bags, their voices humming like distant bees, but I walked through it all like a woman armored in steel. Back at my apartment, I spread the documents across the table. Richard's notice, Paula's analysis. Proof that generosity had turned into exploitation, and that it ended now. I read every line until they blurred, then read them again, committing each word to memory. The old Margaret, the one who bit her tongue until it bled, who smiled through humiliation, would have crumbled under the weight of this confrontation. But she was gone. Samantha made sure of that when she tied that apron around my neck like a leash. My phone buzzed. Helen. Her timing, as always, impeccable. "Well?" she demanded the moment I answered. "It's handled," I said. My voice was level, but a current of something fierce hummed beneath it. Richard drew up the notice. Paula confirmed the rates. "By next week, they'll know everything." There was a beat of silence, then Helen exhaled sharply. "Margaret, this could blow everything up. Ethan might never forgive you." I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle. It was one I had already faced. The relationship I had with him, the one I thought I was protecting, was an illusion. I've been clinging to a ghost. If this is what it takes to wake us both up, so be it. Helen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I'm proud of you." After the call, I stood at the window, staring at the distant roof line of the house I once called home. The house where I baked birthday cakes with Daniel, where Ethan learned to ride a bike on the cracked driveway, where every wall held echoes of laughter that belonged to us. That house was mine, not just on paper, but in history, in love, in sacrifice. And I would not let anyone, least of all a woman who smiled while sharpening knives behind her back, strip that from me. As dusk bled into night, I rehearsed the coming scene in my head. Samantha's practiced smile, Ethan's uneasy glances, the room thick with tension as I laid out the truth they never saw coming. I imagined their shock, their disbelief, the fury curdling Samantha's perfect composure. For once, I would hold the power. Not to wound, but to draw a line so bold it could never be crossed again. I pressed the notice flat against the table, smoothing it with steady hands. 30 days. That was all the law required. After that, they could stay and pay the real price. Or they could leave. Either way, I would reclaim more than just a house. I would reclaim myself. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight as I turned off the lamp and let the room sink into darkness. Sleep came slow, tangled with thoughts of what waited on the other side of dawn. But when it finally claimed me, my last thought was clear, sharp, and unshakable. This isn't revenge, it's justice. And justice, at long last, has my name on it. Stay with me. What happens next will turn their perfect world upside down. Saturday arrived draped in a brittle sky, the kind that threatens snow without delivering. I dressed with a care I hadn't shown in years. A deep blue dress Daniel had always loved, pearl earrings warm against my skin, a sweep of lipstick steadying my resolve. I wasn't dressing for Ethan. I wasn't dressing for Samantha. I was dressing for me, the woman I had almost lost. When I stepped out into the cold, my heels clicked against the pavement like punctuation marks, sharp and deliberate. Every stride carried me closer to the house I had given up out of love, the house where they had turned me into a stranger. Not today. Ethan opened the door before I could knock. His smile was practiced, tight at the edges. "Mom, good to see you." He brushed a kiss across my cheek, already glancing toward the hallway. "Come in. Samantha's just finishing up." The words scraped like sandpaper. My house. Finishing up. I stepped inside, and the changes hit like a slap. The warm earth tones Daniel and I had chosen were gone, replaced by sleek grays and sterile whites. The family photos had vanished. Modern art now stared down from every wall like silent judges. Even the air smelled different. Expensive candles, sharp and citrusy, masking something hollow. Margaret, Samantha's voice slid into the room before she did, smooth as glass. She appeared in the archway, all curves and calculated grace, a smile painted on like armor. Right on time. Come sit. I've prepared some refreshments. I followed them into what had once been my favorite room. Now it looked like a showroom, cold leather, chrome edges, not a whisper of the life Daniel and I had built. I perched on the edge of the couch, my purse resting on my lap like a shield. Ethan cleared his throat, glancing at Samantha before speaking. Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something important. It's about the house. I let my expression stay open, neutral, as if I hadn't already heard every word that was about to fall from their lips. Go on. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes bright with false warmth. What Ethan's trying to say is, we've been thinking about the future. You're all alone in that apartment, and this house has so much space. Wouldn't it be better if things were simpler? For everyone? Her hand brushed Ethan's in a practiced display of unity. We think the best solution is for you to transfer ownership of the house to us. You don't need that kind of responsibility at your age. And we'd make sure you're taken care of course. There's a lovely retirement community just outside the city, quiet, safe, full of people your age. Each word was a polished dagger, delivered with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. I let the silence stretch, watched their confidence bloom in the stillness. Then I set my purse on the coffee table and slid out the folder. That's interesting, I said finally, my voice calm, measured, because I've been thinking about the house too. Samantha's smile flickered just for a moment. Oh, yes. I laid the papers down with deliberate care. I spoke with my attorney and a real estate agent. Ethan's brows drew together. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm talking, I said softly, about the rental agreement you were so eager for me to sign. The one that gives me the right to adjust rent annually. I've never exercised that until now. I slid the notice across the table, the legal language stark and undeniable. Effective 30 days from today, the rent will reflect current market rates. Ethan's face paled. What? His voice cracked, raw disbelief bleeding through. That's triple what you're paying, I added, my tone even, almost gentle. The silence that followed was a living thing, pulsing between us. Samantha broke it first, her laugh brittle. Margaret, you can't be serious. We're family, not strangers. I met her gaze head on, unflinching. Family doesn't humiliate each other in their own home. Family doesn't call someone an old lady in front of guests. Family doesn't plot to ship their mother to a retirement community and take her house. Color drained from her face. You were spying on me? I was sitting in the park, I said coolly. You were the one broadcasting your intentions for anyone to hear. Ethan turned sharply to Samantha. What is she talking about? Her mouth opened, closed, fury sparking in her eyes. She's lying. Enough! My voice cut through the room like a blade. I wasn't shouting, but every syllable landed with weight. I've spent years prioritizing your comfort over my dignity. That ends today. Pay the new rate or find somewhere else. You have 30 days. Ethan's face twisted, shame and anger warring in his eyes. Mom, this isn't fair. Not fair? My breath hitched, but my voice stayed steady. What's not fair is standing in this room, realizing my son watched me be humiliated and said nothing. What's not fair is hearing my daughter-in-law brag about turning you against me. He flinched as if struck. Samantha surged to her feet, her mask shattering. This is blackmail. You're jealous, pathetic. This, I said, rising slowly, is consequence. Yes. The notice lay on the table like a verdict. I picked up my purse, straightened my shoulders, and walked to the door. My heels clicked against the hardwood, each step ringing with finality. Behind me, Samantha's voice rose, shrill and trembling. If you walk out that door, don't expect things to be the same. I paused, hand on the knob, and looked back one last time. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The door closed with a soft click that sounded louder than any slam. Outside, the cold air kissed my skin, sharp and clean. My hands were shaking, but my spine had never felt straighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. 18 days. That's how long the silence lasted. 18 days without a single word from Ethan. Each morning I woke to the same hollow quiet, the kind that seeps into your bones and whispers every fear you've ever had. I filled the hours with chores that didn't need doing, wiping counters that were already clean, folding laundry with surgical precision, anything to drown out the question that beat like a drum in my chest. Had I lost him for good? Helen called daily, her voice a lifeline in the dark. He just needs time, she said. He'll come around. I nodded into the phone, though she couldn't see me, because if I opened my mouth, the truth would slip out. I wasn't sure she was right. The image of Ethan's face the day I walked out haunted me. Shock carving deep lines across his brow, anger burning behind his eyes, and something else. Something that looked like betrayal. I told myself I'd done the right thing. That setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, but survival. Yet in the quiet hours of night, doubt crawled through me like ivy, twisting tight around my heart. On the 18th day, as twilight bled across the sky, my phone rang. I froze mid-step, a dish towel clutched in my hand. When I saw his name, the world tilted. My fingers trembled as I answered. Hello? Mom. His voice was rough, as if dragged over gravel. Can we talk? In person? Air rushed from my lungs in a shaky exhale. Of course, I managed. We chose a coffee shop halfway between us, neutral ground where the walls didn't remember who we used to be. I got there early, claiming a corner table near the window. The tea I ordered sat untouched, steam curling into the dim air as I stared at the door, my pulse a wild drumbeat in my ears. When Ethan walked in, my breath caught. He looked tired, shadows etched beneath his eyes, his shoulders bowed as if carrying something heavy. He spotted me and came over, sliding into the seat across from mine without a word. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of conversation around us felt distant, muffled by the roar in my head. How are you? He asked finally, his voice low. I'm okay, I said. It wasn't the truth, but it was all I could manage. And you? He shrugged, the gesture achingly familiar, a flicker of the boy I once soothed after nightmares. We found an apartment, he said. Moving next week. The words hit like a blow I'd been bracing for and still wasn't ready to take. I nodded, staring at the pale swirl in my tea. I see. Veronica's furious, he added, his mouth twisting around the name. She wanted me to fight it, legally. Said what you did was unforgivable. And you? My voice was barely above a whisper. I looked into it, he said after a pause. Our lawyer told me you were within your rights. His hands clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. But that's not why I'm here. I lifted my gaze, searching his face. I've been thinking about what you said, he continued, his voice thick. About how I stood by, how I let it happen. His eyes met mine then, raw and unflinching. You were right. Whatever I expected, it wasn't that. My throat closed around a swell of emotion as he went on. After you left, I couldn't stop replaying everything. The dinner party, the way she spoke to you, the way I just let it slide. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but the truth? He broke off, dragging a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my chest ache. The truth is I made it easy for her. I believed her when she said you were clingy, that you needed too much. I let her rewrite who you were in my mind. Tears blurred the edges of my vision, but I didn't speak. When you confronted us, he said, voice trembling, I was angry. God, I was so angry. But then I asked her about what you said, about the park. She denied it at first, then she admitted everything. Not just that conversation. All of it. The comments, the little lies. She thought I'd be impressed. His laugh was bitter, jagged. She was wrong. I covered his hand with mine. His skin was warm, trembling. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered, for every time I didn't defend you, for every time I made you feel like less than you are. The weight I'd carried for years shifted then, not gone, but lighter, as if something inside me finally unclenched. I'm not blameless, I said softly. I should have spoken up sooner. I was so afraid of losing you that I let it happen. That doesn't excuse me, he said fiercely, or her. But we sat there for a long time, words spilling like water, breaking through a dam, washing away years of silence. When he finally stood to leave, he pulled me into a hug so fierce it stole my breath. "I'm going to do better," he said against my hair. "If you'll let me." "Always," I whispered. Don't go anywhere. The next part of this story will show you what rebuilding really looks like. 6 months later, I stood on the walkway of the house I once called home, the air warm with the scent of freshly cut grass. It felt strange and familiar all at once, like meeting an old friend after years apart. Sunlight spilled across the front porch, catching the edges of the wind chimes that tinkled softly in the breeze. The sound tugged at something deep inside me. Memories layered like old wallpaper beneath the fresh coat of this new life. A child's laughter broke through the stillness. I turned to see a little girl with dark braids darting across the yard, her small feet pounding against the grass as she chased a bubble that shimmered like a rainbow in the sun. Behind her, a golden retriever bounded happily, barking in joyous accompaniment. "Margaret!" The voice drew me back. Ethan was walking up the path toward me, his steps easy, his smile real. Not the polite, distracted smile he used to wear like a prank, but something softer, lighter, free of the tension that once clung to him like a shadow. "They're inside," he said, nodding toward the open door. "They've been dying to show you the place." I followed him into the house, my heels clicking on hardwood that gleamed under a coat of polish. The rooms were different now, warmer, somehow more alive. The walls, painted a soft golden hue, held family photos that weren't mine, but spoke of love nonetheless. A young couple laughing in a kitchen, a baby swaddled in blue, the little girl with braids grinning toothlessly at the camera. "Mrs. Blake!" The new tenant, a woman with kind eyes and a doctor's calm presence, greeted me with a smile that reached all the way to her eyes. "We're so glad you came." Her husband appeared behind her, cradling a toddler who giggled at the sight of the golden retriever bounding through the doorway. They led us through the house, their voices bright with pride as they pointed out the changes. The open shelves in the kitchen, the cozy reading nook where my dining room once stood, the backyard blooming with life again after years of cold stone. "It feels like home," the woman said, her hand brushing over the banister. "We love it here." And they did. It showed in every corner, every soft throw draped over a chair, every finger-painted masterpiece taped to the refrigerator. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a heartbeat, steady and strong, and I felt something unclench in my chest. When we stepped back outside, the evening sun washed everything in amber light. Children's laughter floated on the breeze, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of loss when I looked at this house. I felt peace. "They're taking good care of it," Ethan said quietly, his gaze on the little girl spinning in circles with the ball at her heels. "They are," I agreed, a smile curving my lips. "It feels alive again." We walked to the cars in companionable silence, the kind that feels full instead of empty. Over these months, we had begun to stitch together something new, a relationship built not on guilt or fear, but on honesty. It wasn't seamless. Some days the old patterns tugged at us like ghosts. But there was an effort on both sides. And in that effort, something real was blooming. Sunday dinners had become our ritual, the table in my cozy apartment laden with roast chicken and laughter. Sometimes Ethan brought dessert, sometimes flowers. Sometimes we just sat with coffee long after the plates were cleared, talking about everything and nothing, the way we used to when he was a boy, and the world felt simpler. As we reached the cars, Ethan turned to me, a hesitant smile tugging at his mouth. "I've been thinking," he said. "Your birthday's next month." "Yes," I said, curious where this was going. "Remember that trip to the Grand Canyon you and Dad always talked about? The one you wanted to take me on when I was a kid?" His eyes met mine, steady and hopeful. "What if we finally do it?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. That dream had been shelved so long ago it felt like something from another life. Before the heart attack, before the silence, before the years of swallowing words until they tasted like ashes. I reached out, squeezing his hand. "I'd like that very much," I said, my voice thick with something that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. As I drove home, the warm glow of evening poured through the windshield, painting the road in gold. I thought about everything the past year had taken, and everything it had given back. I had lost illusions, yes, lost the false comfort of peace bought with self-erasure. But in its place, I had found something far more precious: the strength to stand, the courage to speak, in a bond with my son that felt, for the first time in years, real. I parked outside my apartment and sat for a moment, watching the sky blush into twilight. Somewhere deep inside, a truth settled like a stone at the bottom of a still pond. Dignity is not negotiable. Love that demands its surrender is not love at all. Tomorrow, I would call Helen and tell her about the trip. She'd probably cry. Maybe I would too. But tonight, as the first stars pricked the darkening sky, all I felt was a quiet certainty humming through my bones. I had walked through fire, and on the other side, I found myself waiting. The night before my birthday, I sat by the window of my apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars. The air hummed with quiet, broken only by the low whir of traffic and the soft tick of the clock on the wall. On the table beside me lay two envelopes, one with our travel itinerary for the Grand Canyon, the other with a handwritten note from Ethan I'd read a dozen times already. Looking forward to making new memories with you, Mom. I traced the letters with my fingertip, my throat tightening. So much had changed in 6 months. Within him, within me, within the fragile space between us that had once been filled with silence and regret. We were rebuilding brick by brick on ground swept clean of pretense. And though the foundation was new, it felt stronger than what came before, because this time it was laid in truth. Outside, a wind stirred the trees, their branches brushing against the glass like fingertips. I thought of the years I had lived small, folding myself into the corners of my own life. All the times I stayed silent when I should have spoken. All the times I let fear masquerade as love. I had given up more than a house. I had almost given up myself. Not anymore. The journey from that night in the kitchen, the apron tied too tight, the laughter cutting like shards of glass, to this quiet moment had not been easy. It had been jagged and raw and filled with nights when doubt coiled in my gut like smoke. But if I learned anything, it is this: peace bought at the cost of your dignity is no peace at all. I rose from the chair and crossed to the dresser, where a small wooden box sat waiting. Inside were relics of another life: Daniel's watch, worn smooth by time, a Polaroid of us on our wedding day, his smile wide and certain, a ticket stub from the first concert he took me to. I touched each one gently, a litany of what was, a reminder of the man who once told me, "You're stronger than you think, Margaret. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." I smiled through the tears that pricked my eyes. For years, I had forgotten that strength, buried it beneath compromise and quiet desperation. But it had been there all along, waiting for me to remember. When I slid the box shut, it felt less like closing a door and more like opening one. Tomorrow, Ethan and I would board a plane to a place carved by time and storms, a canyon vast enough to hold everything we'd lost and everything we were trying to build. Maybe the distance would give us room to speak truth still lingering in the shadows. Maybe it would give us the gift of laughter, real laughter, not the brittle sound that used to echo in a house that wasn't mine anymore. As I climbed into bed, the city's hum fading into the lull of sleep, a quiet certainty pulsed through me. I had stepped into fire and come out not unscathed, but remade, stronger, wiser, whole. If you've listened this far, thank you for walking with me through every twist and turn, every heartbreak and small victory. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment that forced you to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself? What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. Share this story if it spoke to you, and subscribe so we can walk through more journeys together. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: love that asks you to surrender your worth is not love. It's a bargain with an empty hand. Real love, the kind that endures, makes room for your strength. And maybe that's the truest lesson of all.